My name is Oliver Leenbergen. I am an adoptee. I was adopted as an infant. I was born in Los Angeles, California. I was born to a Filipino mother, and I was adopted by a Dutch Indonesian family. I was adopted actually into a family that I looked a lot like, which really changed the dynamic of my adoption story. I grew up not knowing that I was adopted. And
What?
yep, I looked exactly like my parents. It wasn't until I finished high school and I was just about to go into the Army, and my parents sat me down and said, "Oh, by the way, I need you to know we had trouble conceiving way back when, and we adopted you. And we don't know much. We think your mother's Filipino, don't know much about your father. We don't have any information." While I was in school, I met Melissa. We got married. It wasn't until I had children that I had to face the reality that I'm adopted. When my child was born, I had this inner feeling in me that I need to know where my children are at all times. This child is my blood, and this is my child.
So, Melissa, what date did Oliver tell you he was adopted?
So he told me he was adopted time when we were friends, I think before we started dating. But it was just this I'm adopted thing. And then he didn't really talk about it. And although he says he started like diving into the adoption thing because our daughter's almost 30 years ago, he didn't really talk about it with me for a long time. At least, I mean, I would say he didn't start talking about it outside his head for at least 10, 12 years. So it was a lot of inward processing before he even started talking about it a little more. And then it really wasn't until at the most 10 years ago that he really started exploring.
Oliver, can you share why it was more of an internal thing for you at first? Because I know you and Melissa have a fabulous relationship and support each other so well.
We
Yeah.
do. I don't know. I think it's thinking about the experience that my parents had and their not willingness to tell me, and that fear that if I start looking and that gets out, we as adoptees, we fear that that will hurt our adoptive parents. I don't know why I didn't necessarily share it. There weren't that many resources to go to. There was nothing out there. That this was kind of, we were on the very edge of the internet. So what could I do?
Yeah. And it's very common for adoptees to not start searching until after their raising or adoptive parents pass away.
Yeah, that's in my opinion when he really
Right.
started looking was when
Right.
his mom's health
They,
started
they,
going downhill.
I would agree with that. Melissa's mother was very much into genealogy at the time, and she had her full ancestry account. And for Christmas one year, she got everybody ancestry DNA kits.
We all spit in that
And
tube.
cool, so we all
Right.
spit in the tube, and a few months later got our results back. Her mother calls us up immediately after we get back in town and says, you need to check your ancestry account right away. And I'm like, okay. And open up the account, and genetic match showed mother, had a name. I mean, this was the unicorn of DNA searches. I didn't know that at the time, but I lucked out, and suddenly I have this name, and I'm like, wow. I had gone through this process of searching for years and years, and now I've got a name. And immediately went into research mode online, which the internet was more filled out in 2018. So found her immediately, found a name, found some pictures, found, all sorts of stuff. And then I
So,
sat there and I said, what do I do with this?
yeah.
What do I do with
I,
this?
I want to ask Melissa, like, you're watching Oliver go through this process, right? Up until 2018. I mean, it's a lot to be supportive of somebody going through this.
Well, and all the way up until 2018, it was random comments here and there. It was the anxiety and yet excitement over possibly doing DNA tests. It was just something that was still very closed. And at the same time, it was nothing that I could relate to. So it's hard because I have no frame of reference for it at all.
One of Melissa's friends growing up, Melissa grew up in Oregon. They had open birth records, and she had gotten an original birth certificate, found her biological family, reestablished contact, had the wonderful honeymoon period, and then things fell apart and relationships didn't have healthy boundaries. Lines were overstepped, and she had to go non-communication with her biological family.
Yeah, because
but
we
that's
want to
still it was just something that was still very closed. And at the same time, it was nothing that I could relate to. So it's hard because I have no frame of reference for it at all.
We kind of had as a frame of reference. One of Melissa's friends growing up, Melissa grew up in Oregon. They had open birth records. I think it's like 2016 or 2015, something like that, earlier than that. And she had gotten an original birth certificate, found her biological family, reestablished contact, had the wonderful honeymoon period, and then things fell apart and relationships didn't have healthy boundaries. Lines were overstepped, and she had to go non-communication with her biological family.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
but
we want
that's
to
still somebody adjacent to me. It's still not me.
Yeah.
It's still not
Sure.
me. So it's walking
Sure,
aside
yes.
somebody on the journey and being supportive, but I still don't have a personal frame of reference. Honestly, when he started looking into some of the adoption conferences and things, which is what he started to do after that, when he invited me to them, I literally was like, I don't think I can do this with you. I think you need to do this, and sometime later on I feel like it'll be the right time to join you more, but right now I feel like this is something you have to do. And so that's kind of a controversial position to take, but at the time it was where I felt like I think in many ways from the outside, I think it was helpful for him to become the expert, to become the searcher, and then years later, then start bringing me in when I had more compassion, more empathy, more knowledge, and he knew more of what he was going through because he'd processed longer.
I know there's that for some significant others, there's the desire to step in. And I really, I honor and appreciate the fact that you held back, even though that might not have been your first reaction. Do you have some advice?
Well, let's be honest. There were a lot of times I said, just send a letter. But you do you, right? But
Yeah.
I did say, just send a letter. So the advice I would have is don't go around their back and do something like send the letter for them. Honor and respect the pace at which they're going, even if it's not your own. But definitely, I would say don't meddle in the process that they're working through, because it's not just the facts and the information. There's a whole emotional component that has to be processed and worked through. I can tell you that there were a couple years that he was in his head a lot, and it was difficult for me because I didn't feel like he was fully present with a lot of things going on in my life. And so, again, giving the space and having the grace for that and recognizing and understanding why and how it's working. And since he has finally been able to meet his birth mother, I've I've seen that come back around, the more fully present husband and person. It just goes to show that there really is a catharsis for having the full circle, the knowledge, and how it affects subsequent relationships. It's a domino effect on your relationships and your emotional state.
The death of my father in January. And finally, I said, you know what? I've heard from my sister that my mother had a stroke last year. Dementia is starting to set in. I can't wait anymore. I thought I've provided her opportunities to reach out. I said, I'm going to be at a coffee shop for an hour. All those opportunities and just nothing come of it. And I said, talking with my sister, I asked, what has she said about this? And found out that her husband had been trying to encourage her to try to reach out and try to work on this. And he said, what would you do if he just showed up on your front door? She said, well, I wouldn't kick him out. And so after March, I said, I'm going to take her up on the offer. I'm tired. I'm just tired of waiting. I don't think I can wait much longer because everybody is getting older. So I messaged my sister. I said, okay, I'm coming down and I'm going to show up. And if she kicks me out, she kicks me out. If she doesn't, then we'll see what happens. She said, okay. We came in the door and she came out from the kitchen and my sister told her, this is someone that's been wanting to meet you for a while. And she immediately knew who I was. And she came to me and I pulled her into an embrace and we stood there in the doorway for a good 10 minutes. And she was just saying, I'm so happy to finally meet you. And we spent the next 3 hours just sitting and talking, eating. And she said, for years, I just did not know what to do. I didn't know how to deal with this. She was told that once she relinquished me, that she would just forget me. And she said, I tried to forget you, and I just couldn't.
I have to say, as pushy as I am, and send the letter, all that. When he said he was going to go down and go with his sister and just show up on the doorstep, I was like, don't not sure I would do that. Not sure that's the best strategy. But again, it just goes to show it's got to be each person's decision. Can't make the right decisions for somebody else, right? Because he felt like he was running out of time, and it worked. She's so happy that she met him. I couldn't give him significance. Like, it doesn't matter how much I focus on him, lift him up on a pedestal, all of the things that I could do to kowtow and make him feel good and like lift his self-esteem. That's not going to solve the problem of an internal sense of significance. That's something that each person has to go through and say, who do I believe myself to be? I always use the gemstone analogy, like a sapphire on the path that you're walking on in the mountains is still a sapphire. But the more you shape it, the more you hone it through rough experiences, that grit experience, the brighter it gets. It takes a specialist to be able to facet and shape it to reflect the most light. But you're a sapphire. You're not ever going to be a ruby, right? And a ruby is not ever going to be a sapphire. And so you have to learn to appreciate who you were made to be and find the value in you as a ruby or you as a sapphire or you as a diamond, and work with what you have, with your experiences, and from my perspective, who God made you be and what purpose he's given you at that time.
I mean,
Yeah.
family is so beautiful and flexible and amazing, and we can build it and shape it in all these amazing ways.